Late night, any night means the voice of college football is here with you, specifically Monday through Saturday. We get the ladies of college football, of course, on Sunday. And if you see that the destination is a bit different than it typically is, this is what we're going to do moving forward is present the voice of college football, our late night, the college football show on Mondays here at SG1 Sports. We, of course, have the guy that makes it all happen here at SG1. Chris is here to make a bit of a transition here.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for jumping on the channel and partnering up with us. Of course, we've had a partnership for quite a while and looking forward to this and just something new on the channel, something live where we can interact with the audience.
Absolutely. So don't worry, folks. Chris is still going to be delivering all of his great content, schedule breakdowns, predictions, and all of that will not cease. But we will get that live interactive element going here on Monday nights. We got Matt Zemek right next to me as well on the other side from Trojans Wire. Matt also, of course, at USC at the Voice of College Football and our chief editor at vocfb.com. We'll dive a little bit deeper into all those topics a little bit later. But we want to talk some college football, of course, Matt. And before we move on to a week 5 preview of sorts, and we're going to talk Penn State, Oregon in particular, what were your biggest takeaways, Matt, from week 4?
You know, my main takeaway so far from the college football season, not just week 4, is, you know, we have people mentioning like this team's top 10 in rushing defense and this team is top 5 in scoring offense. If teams haven't played anybody, like I don't want these stats to be and rankings to be thrown around because like it doesn't tell me anything. Now, stats mean something if you're absolutely awful. Like, you know, if UCLA is giving up 1 billion yards running and throwing, okay, we know UCLA is bad, but at the higher end, you know, let's see teams do it against quality competition, and then I'll take a statistical ranking or index seriously. And we really don't have that. And I mean, I know you said look back at week 4, but just to kind of give that little sneak peek to Oregon Penn State, the biggest game in week 5, neither team has played anybody, you know, so it makes that game really fascinating that they go from playing tomato cans right to the very top of the food chain. Like there's no Nebraska or Minnesota, you know, mid-tier Big Ten opponent to kind of, you know, give them maybe a few light body blows and some sparring practice. No, they're going from the bottom of the power structure all the way to the top. I mean, that's you don't get that scenario a lot. That's why that's fascinating. So really, just, you know, who's good, who's not. We're about to find out. I haven't learned a whole lot so far. You know, we're also going to learn about Alabama and Georgia. I think the biggest week 4 game, biggest week 4 result was clearly the SIG is still very much lit at Indiana, 63-10. You know, you slap around a Bielema team by 53. That's a statement. And I know that, you know, Alec Keyser, who's a contributor to vocfb.com, and he has his Indiana show, like he believed in this Indiana team. I did too. Like they had, in my mind, Mendoza is an upgrade at quarterback from Rourke. And you combine that with the Cignetti structure, system, attitude. And one specific thing to note about Cignetti is that, you know, Indiana does play the cupcakes, no question about it, but Indiana learns from the cupcakes. Indiana sharpens itself from the cupcakes. Not all programs do that. Like I cover USC. USC's had a pretty easy schedule, and things are not ironed out. Things are not, you know, precise and polished, certainly on the defensive side. Offense, yeah, but like, let's see what kind of test Illinois offers. But USC's a mess. This feels a lot like 2023 at USC, you know, soft early schedule. They're winning every game, but what happens when they get into the teeth of the schedule in the middle of the season? Didn't go very well for USC 2 years ago. And so, you know, I'm not confident about USC this far. But anyway, just to get back to Cignetti, he plays cupcakes, but he manages to make it work for his team, for his structure. He fixes the rough edges, the flaws, and not a lot of other people in the business do that.
I'd like to hear Chris's take. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
You're talking about the USC game, just real quick. What also worries me there is the early kickoff. USC having to travel kickoff at noon Eastern time. That's going to be a challenge. But another team, my big takeaway from week 4, Texas Tech. Texas Tech looks like, in my opinion, the team to beat in the Big 12. I mean, that defensive line, that's like an SEC defensive line, the best that money could buy. I mean, they're loaded there, receivers making plays. They got 2 quarterbacks apparently, with Will Hammond coming in, and he was very impressive. So that was Indiana for sure, and then also Texas Tech. To me, it's early, but they look like the front runner in the Big 12 to me.
Yeah, I caught basically that game start to finish, Utah and Texas Tech. And even though it was 13-10 with maybe 10 minutes left in the game, Texas Tech was clearly the better team. And then they steamrolled with the final 3 touchdowns. And yes, Will Hammond can sling it. I don't know what his final numbers were. There were some drops there that didn't help him out. But man, he is impressive throwing the football. And Texas Tech did something that you don't rarely see, especially with Utah playing at home and Rice-Eccles, is dominate the football game. I heard a stat that was Kyle Whittingham's 2nd worst defeat at home in his stay at Utah. 24-point loss.
I would just mention on that game that I would agree with Chris. Texas Tech's the team to beat in the Big 12. Iowa State struggled with an Arkansas State team that was messing around with Kennesaw State over the weekend, and also, of course, Iowa State's win over Kansas State doesn't look nearly as good now that Kansas State has cratered. So I would agree with Chris that Texas Tech's the favorite right now in the Big 12. But the other thing that needs to be said, just as kind of a cautionary note, I'm not so much doubting Texas Tech. It's just kind of like I'm not 100% sold. I'm mostly sold. I'm not 100% sold because Devin Dampier wasn't 100% healthy. And like the quarterback situation at Utah, again, 3rd straight season, Kyle Whittingham's run into this problem with his QB1 being injured and Utah fans going absolutely insane in an understandable way. Like, why does this stuff just get revealed so late? Why is there so much uncertainty about our quarterback's playing status and Utah not having a QB2 who's good enough or trustworthy enough that Kyle Whittingham can take his injured quarterback out, get a plan B? I mean, this is the 3rd straight season this is happening to Utah. So people in Salt Lake City have to be going nuts.
Yeah, I backed off on my criticism of Dampier after I heard he was hurt, because he did not look like a Power 4 quarterback at all. He looked atrocious in that game. And I thought, I've heard about this guy, and he was a Mountain West Conference Player of the Year last year. And this is what Utah went to go get. And that's really the first time I'd seen him play extensive time. And it was ugly. But again, considerations there in terms of his health. But Texas Tech on defense, I want to see this play out against further opponents. That obviously the Big 12 is the one conference where it's difficult to nail down a handful of games that are meaningful because there's just so many. Meanwhile, Arizona State's winning on a walk-off field goal against Baylor. That seemed to be pretty significant as well. But yeah, like Chris, I like Texas Tech at this point. They're a physical team. And their defensive line was dominant in that game. Chris, however long you stick around, I do want to get your take on the SEC and specifically what happened in Norman with Auburn in town, because that was a heck of a ball game. And we talked about it with Auburn taking the lead with about 7 minutes left. Oklahoma comes down with John Mateer. And then, Auburn wasn't able to make any kind of a late comeback.
Yeah, there's plenty to unpack in that game. Obviously, the officiating that got the headlines with the overturn play, the fumble recovery for a touchdown that they overturned, which, again, my opinion on that, I'm not saying what they went with was wrong, but I didn't see that you could overturn that. Like if they had called it that way on the field, I wouldn't have had a problem. But that was an issue. And then obviously the play where the substitution play where they faked a substitution. Even the SEC came out the next day, said that was illegal, should have been an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. And I've heard fans say that, well, they probably still would have scored on that drive. Well, it was already, I think it might have been like 2nd and 15 or something. I think they might have already had a penalty. And that's a 15-yard penalty. So I have a hard time believing they would have scored a touchdown on that drive. And so that was obviously that was huge. I will say that it did kind of feel like when Oklahoma had to have it in the fourth quarter, they were able to deliver. And so I give them a lot of credit there. And then obviously the sacks. A lot of people want to blame the offensive line for Auburn. To me, it was Jackson Arnold holding the ball. It felt like at least half of those sacks were on him. You got to get rid of the football. You got to take off and run. You got to do something. And that was really the difference in the game, because when they weren't getting sacked, the offense was making some plays. Cam Coleman, and they missed him a couple times, but he had some big catches in the game. And that was like a huge mismatch that they did not exploit enough. Like I would have been throwing the ball to him every other play, but just, for whatever reason, they didn't do that. And it was as an Auburn fan, it was obviously disappointing. But again, my takeaway, I expected a double-digit win from Oklahoma in that game. So I actually came away from that game feeling a little bit better about Auburn going forward. But obviously the outcome was very disappointing.
Matt, what is going on at Clemson? What's going on with Dabo Swinney? What has happened to this team that was a national championship contender and a pick by many, including Phil Steele, to win it all?
Well, one of my college football writing jobs is not just at Trojans Wire, but it's at College Sports Wire. It's also under the Gannett USA Today umbrella. And I wrote a column on Saturday about not just Mike Gundy, but also Dabo not adjusting to the NIL and portal era. Like, this is the confirmation that, Dabo dug in his heels. He wanted to do it his way, the homegrown, internally developed culture, his recruits, his boys, his style. Dabo, you got to give it up. Take the L, not just to Syracuse, but in terms of this bigger bet that you made at the poker table that you could do it your way. Nope. You have to do it the way the game is played. And there's a parallel with Lincoln Riley at USC, right? Like, Lincoln Riley thought he could do it his own way in Los Angeles. No, he needed a professional general manager. He needed someone else to run the larger shop. He wasn't doing it. His ways at Oklahoma did not translate well to LA. So, in some ways, stubbornness is a virtue, right? The haters, they doubt you, and you're going to prove them, and you're going to show them. And that competitive drive is often what makes athletes, coaches, competitors great in the course of time. But sometimes stubbornness is a vice. Sometimes it holds you back. You have your blinders on. You have that bunker mentality, and you're not willing to adjust. And this magnifies why Nick Saban is an all-time great coach. He wanted to play, 1979 style SEC football. He wanted to win games 13-6. Is this what football is supposed to be? All his belly aching, but he could have just continued to sulk and do it his way. No, he adjusted. He realized he needed to win games 49-42. Alabama beating the Dan Mullen, Kyle Trask team in 52-46 in the 2020 SEC championship game on the way to another national title. Saban might not have liked it, but he made fundamental structural overall adjustments. It's why he's a great coach. And so Dabo, who was right there with Nick Saban several years ago, one coach showed the elasticity needed to adjust to the times. The other did not. Dabo failing to adjust to the NIL and portal era is the big takeaway here.
Yeah, Clemson and Illinois, the big losers of week 4. Week 5, we shall see, because we've got 2 mammoth showdowns, Alabama, Georgia, and Oregon, Penn State. We got Marty Leap checking in. Marty joins us from the Whiteout Report. Marty, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good. How you guys doing?
We're doing just fine. How's that new podcast coming?
Good. It's so real quick on it, just so everybody knows if we're good with it. It's called the Whiteout Report podcast with Dylan, Kellyanne Crawley, and I. Dylan and I previously worked together both at Black Shoe Diaries and with Happy Valley Insider through the Rivals Network before the On3 acquire happened. And he and I wanted to find something to do this year to still cover Penn State. So we have our pre-show podcast usually on Wednesdays, and then our post-game podcast every Saturday after it wraps up. So feel free to find us on Twitter and come track us down on YouTube.
Well, Marty, we would like to officially welcome Penn State football to the 2025 college football season.
Yeah. I mean, after those first, we jokingly on the podcast weren't even calling it non-conference. We were calling it their preseason schedule. Those three teams, and I think obviously we'll get into it here tonight. There's definitely some pros and cons to that. I mean, but to have 3 games of that caliber, and I use that term lightly, followed by a bye week going into Oregon. I mean, again, you would like to see you having been a little bit more tested, I think, but there's definitely a lot of pros to where, you're able to play a lot of young guys, cultivate some depth, guys coming off season injuries and surgeries, easing them back into it. So, you're about as healthy and ready to go as you can be from that standpoint, going into a just absolute showdown of this magnitude.
Marty, let me hit you with a question, and good to talk to you again. I remember you being on our USC preview show last year. So, to me, looking at this game, I mentioned to Mark that both Oregon and Penn State, they're just playing nobodies, and they go right to the top. Like there's no Minnesota or Nebraska mid-tier Big Ten game to kind of ease these teams in. They're just going right to the top of the food chain. So that's interesting. But anyway, my question is, Jim Knowles now at Penn State, but he shut down this Oregon offense in the Rose Bowl. Now, obviously it was Dylan Gabriel, not Dante Moore, but like Dylan Gabriel, proven winner, very experienced. Dante Moore at the other end of the spectrum in terms of experience. So what's the sense in terms of the Jim Knowles attack plan against Dante Moore and the Oregon offense? How much do you think he's going to take from the Rose Bowl into this game, or is this just a completely different animal? We'll unpack that for us.
Yeah, I'm very curious what that's going to look like, because like you said, you had a lot of success against them in the Rose Bowl. Obviously, just completely smothered that Oregon offense. At the same time, I'm sure Will Stein's going to come out looking with a completely different game plan than he had for the Rose Bowl going against the Jim Knowles defense. So that's a caveat here as well. But I think if you're Knowles, I think a big part of it too is you mentioned Dylan Gabriel. We're all agree Dante Moore has much more physical ability, a much higher ceiling than Dylan Gabriel. But Gabriel had, been there, done that, had proven it. And, for Dante Moore, yeah, there was that year at UCLA, but this is his first real kind of road test as a starter, and it couldn't be much more challenging than what it's going to be on Saturday night. So I think that's a factor for Knowles as well, right? You want to play fast in your pass rush. You want to try and make more uncomfortable early and often. I think one thing that's really going to get tested on Saturday for Jim Knowles, and be curious to see how he does it. Penn State spent all offseason talking about this corner room, right? They think they have a legitimate All-American first-round pick in A.J. Harris. They really like some of the guys behind him, Zion Tracy, Davian Collins, Elliott Washington. How much, and some of this could be, testing young Oregon receivers too. How much does he look to put those guys on an island early in the game and tell your pass rush, bring an Amari Campbell, a Dom DeLuca, Tony Rojas, whoever it may be, as an extra blitzer. Hey, go get the quarterback, go make him uncomfortable, go make life tough on Dante Moore. Because I do think if you're Penn State, one of the paths to victory in this game is you make it uncomfortable for Moore early, and you just never let him in the offense get comfortable. Because we've seen that in the whiteout before, right? Go back to I forget which year it was, one year when they blew the doors off Michigan, where Michigan's getting called for a delay of game on the first play of the game. And a few years ago against Minnesota, same thing. First play of the game, they had called for a false start, and it just snowballs on them. So we've seen it happen before, and we've seen it happen with good teams where this crowd, the Ohio State game, everybody remembers the block 6 game where that was JT Barrett, right? One of the most accomplished quarterbacks of his era, who just couldn't handle the atmosphere, couldn't handle the crowd. When the pass rush got going, Ohio State crumbled. So we've seen it happen in the whiteout before. So I'm going to be very curious to see if Knowles, this defensive back room that we heard so much about this offseason, how much trust does he put in them at least early? in order to try and really get that pass rush in Dante Moore's face, make him uncomfortable, make life hard on him.
So we know, Marty, that this defense was elite last year. They lost some exceptional talent, but at the same time, they were bringing back a ton of guys that were expected to be, again, one of the top defenses in the country. Obviously, we had you on every few weeks to update us on where this defense stood. Now that you've seen them 3 times, again, you mentioned the caliber, in quotes, of opponents. Is there anybody standing out that wasn't necessarily expected to, or any concerns, anything that's happened? Because I got to tell you, aside from a halftime highlight of like one play here and one play there, I've seen nothing of this football team yet.
Yeah, I will say defensively, I mean, so far it's been a lot of what you'd expect. And I apologize, my dog just chased the cat.
They've got what, 2 shutouts?
Background news. One, Villanova scored on the last play.
Okay, that's right. Yeah.
But I mean, Deni Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant have been unblockable, which you would hope against this opponent. I think if you have any concern, it's still the linebacker play to an extent. Tony Rojas has looked awesome. He was a guy last year who, I mean, played really well in the postseason. The pick 6 against SMU was tremendous. But it was battling a shoulder issue all year. And sometimes the tackling was questionable. He's been much better this year. He looks like a guy who had an offseason to let that shoulder rest and recover from surgery. But there's still some question there, right? I mean, Dom DeLuca is going to go down as a Penn State legend, especially for what he did against SMU in the playoff last year. But he was a former walk-on for a reason. There's some limitations there. Amari Campbell, the transfer from North Carolina, has played well, but at times has looked lost on the field. So you still have some concern at linebacker. As for a guy who, has really burst onto the scene, it's true freshman Chaz Coleman. The staff hyped him all off season. There was some buzz in the last building that there's people in this program who think he's going to be a top 5 pick one day. And through 4 games, the stats don't do it justice. He has a sack, a blocked punt, and 3 tackles for a loss. But people can't block him. It has not mattered where he's lined up on the field. And again, like we've said, and we're going to continue to say, you take with the caveat of who they've played, but he's a true freshman who last year this time was playing quarterback in high school. And he has been an absolute terror at defensive end. If LeVar Arrington's son wasn't on the team, Chaz Coleman would have been the person who got 11 after Abdul Carter moved on. That's how highly they think of him, and he's looked that way so far. So I think that's been the biggest pleasant surprise on this defense has been Chaz Coleman. Really, the defensive line as a whole, some of their young defensive tackles look ahead of where I think people thought they would be at this point, which is promising as well. Because, I mean, in football, obviously it's in the trenches. And if you can roll 5-6 deep at defensive tackle, which I think they can do this year in conference play, that goes a long way of keeping guys fresh. So in the fourth quarter, you can have Zane Durant out there with maybe 10 less snaps on his legs than he would have otherwise and things of that nature. But, yeah, I think the defense definitely, even with what they lost, does not look like it's taken a step back. And, again, the guys you expect to dominate have. And the real big surprise has been Chaz Coleman, where there was so much buzz around him all offseason. But, hey, until the true freshman gets here and you see it on the field, and boy, have we ever seen it on the field. So I think there's still a lot of reasons to expect this defense to be one of the best in the country again this year. But obviously Saturday is going to be a huge test for them.
I got a question on the other side of the ball. So Penn State preseason, I had very high expectations. My preseason pick to win the national championship. Obviously, the wide receiver position has been a little bit of an issue in the past, bringing the transfers. How are they working out? How's the pass game looking? Replacing Tyler Warren, how's that going? Because like Mark, I haven't really watched Penn State this year. We'll be watching them Saturday night, obviously. Yeah, tell me a little bit about how that's going.
Yeah, I mean, the transfer receivers have been really good. Trevor Pena has 13 catches for 166 in the score. Kyron Hudson has 14 for 156 in the score. Now, Devontae Ross only has 5 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown, but Ross was hurt most of fall camp, so he's one that they're kind of really were easing into things. But the biggest thing with the receivers, it hasn't even just been the production. There's catches being made that you're like, no receiver on this roster the last 2 years would have made those catches. And they're not necessarily, these outstanding over-the-top receptions. I mean, again, I go back to the Orange Bowl last year. They did not have – no receivers caught a ball in the Orange Bowl. So I don't think it's a stretch to say if any one of these three guys were on the team last year, they would have played for the national championship. So the receivers definitely have taken a big step forward with those three. And it's crisper. Guys are getting open. There's not the issues with separation that have been there the past couple of years. I think Kyron Hudson, Matt, I know you and I had discussed him coming to Penn State in the past, where I think that Big Ten experience goes a long way. And he knows how to carry himself. I know he's a captain at USC. He's a captain here, kind of that leader of the room. I think he's helped with the young guys a lot. And with replacing Tyler Warren, I mean, those three have helped. At tight end, the guy to watch, I mean, Khalil Dinkins is the quote-unquote starter, but the guy to watch is Luke Reynolds. He's averaging 11 yards a catch. Every time he catches the ball, you can see the explosiveness. You can see the playmaking ability. He reminds me a lot of Mike Gesicki. He's a slightly better blocker. With the ball in his hands, reminds me a lot of Gesicki. Luke Reynolds is the guy who last year against Minnesota, when they ran the fake punt to put the game away, he was the one who ran the play. So someone who from the time he was a true freshman last year, they had a lot of faith in. And you've seen his role just slowly grow in the offense each week. So that's another guy to watch. But, I mean, the passing game, it's kind of wild because the past 2 years, the passing game, the problem wasn't necessarily Drew Aller, it was who he was throwing to. But through 3 games, Drew Aller has been he's left a lot to be desired. His mechanics have been bad at times. The footwork hasn't been there. I thought against Nevada, he played pretty well. And the pre-snap reads, the decision-making, that sort of thing was tremendous. And in the last 2 weeks, it just has not been. Now, I'm sure no one would ever say this, but when you're playing Villanova, you're playing FIU, and that FIU game was in a monsoon for the first half, it's hard to get up for it. It is. They also aren't running him at all. So some of the RPOs and things of that nature, the defenses are selling out on the running backs. And James Franklin came out and said, like, after the Nevada game, Drew ran the ball like 6 times. He was ticked. Like, he doesn't want him running the ball that much in those games, right? Save those hits for Oregon for conference play. So I think you're going to see him run a lot more on Saturday, which will throw a wrinkle in there at the offense. But yeah, if you can get Drew into a rhythm, I think this passing game can really click because the transfer receivers, all 3 of them look like they're going to be big hits. And again, Luke Reynolds is a young guy who's really starting to emerge at tight end. Andrew Rappleyea is another young tight end who would have played a big role last year, but tore his ACL against West Virginia in the first game of the year. He's averaging 11 yards a catch this year. So the playmakers are there. It's just a matter of you need Drew Aller to settle in and get into a rhythm, which is something he really hasn't done yet this year.
Marty, let me talk about Penn State's offensive coordinator. I talked about the defensive coordinator. Now let's talk about the offensive coordinator. So Andy Kotelnicki, he did a lot of elaborate things with Tyler Warren, whom Chris mentioned in his question. But that dynamic I mentioned earlier, playing nobody and then now going all the way to the top of the food chain with Oregon, with nothing in between, and this game being in late September. The history of college football has often tilted based on the timing of matchups. Like, if Bobby Bowden and Florida State had played Miami in November instead of early in the season, maybe the story of this sport in the 1980s and 1990s is dramatically different. So with this game being earlier in the season and Penn State having these new pieces, a new configuration on offense, does that point to a simpler plan for Kotelnicki, or is this just a game that's too big to try and be simple and just, kind of ease Drew Aller in? No, you need to throw the kitchen sink at Oregon. Which way do you think the pendulum swings along those lines?
I definitely think it swings towards throw the kitchen sink. I mean, they have been frustratingly boring and vanilla these first 3 games, which again, you expect, right? They could line their D squad up and they'd be 3-0 right now. So, but I think, again, you're going to see Drew run more, which he hasn't done much this year. One thing Andy Kotelnicki offense is known for is the pre-snap motions and that sort of stuff. We haven't seen a lot of it. I think you're going to see a lot more of that on Saturday. I think a lot of times that can be very underrated on how much that can make things difficult for a defense. We haven't seen a whole lot yet in the way of trick plays or, last year it was Tyler Warren. I don't know who it's going to be this year, but they're going to have somebody. There's going to be something we haven't seen yet. There's going to be multiple somethings we haven't seen yet. I'm confident of that you're going to see on Saturday. And, in the 12-team era, obviously this game is not nearly as important as it would have been 2 years ago. But at the same time, make no ifs, ands, or buts about it. James Franklin knows what his reputation is in these kinds of games, and he knows this is a great opportunity to get that monkey off his back because I think if you're Penn State, this is one that you really got to find a way to win it because everything's in your favor, right? Oregon's got to come the whole way across the country to play in maybe the most hostile environment in college football. It's a young quarterback in his real first true road test. You are the Ohio State of last year, the Michigan of 2 years ago, where you brought everybody back to make one last run at this. This is one you got to get. And I think that Kotelnicki's going to leave no stone unturned. I also think part of that with hey, we really want this one. This is shaping up to be maybe the biggest recruiting weekend in the history of Penn State football with what their visitor list is. You want to put on a show for those guys that are going to be there. So yeah, I think Kotelnicki's going to completely empty the bag this weekend. And part of it also is, if you look at their schedule, after this, you have UCLA, you have Northwestern, you've got a bye week. You got some time to play another team that you really, view as a threat to you. So you've got some time, if you empty the bag this weekend, to come up with something new for when you go to Ohio State in November that the Buckeyes haven't seen on film. So I think that's a factor also where, you've got a whole month till you go to Columbus after this, where if you completely empty the tool bag this weekend and get that victory, you've got time to come up with something new that the Buckeyes haven't seen that you don't want to have on film.
Well, it's been a couple of years since we welcomed these 4 teams from the West Coast, and we started to play around with matchups like, wait, we're going to get to see them against them and them against them. And this is one of those that would otherwise have not been possible, or most likely not would have been scheduled. Penn State hosting Oregon, whiteout. Matt, anything else for Marty? Otherwise, I'll let him go.
I'm good. Thank you, Marty.
Yep. Marty, we appreciate you stopping by. And once again, just let everyone know where they can find the Whiteout Report.
Yeah, you can find us on Twitter at the Whiteout Report. And then, go on YouTube, type in the Whiteout Report podcast. You'll track us down. So we'll be here on the East Coast. It'll be pretty late, but we'll be live Saturday night after the game to break it down. And then, so typically we do our preview show on Wednesdays. This week it'll be on Tuesday. So tomorrow night, probably about 9 or 9:30. Check us out. We'll be live. And it should be a great matchup. And, it's nice that this was a game that got picked by NBC and not by Fox, because the whiteout, God didn't intend for the whiteout to be played at noon. It's supposed to be prime time against an Oregon, against an Ohio State, against the Michigan, not the last few years where it's been no knock on Minnesota or Washington, but those aren't the teams you play in a prime time whiteout. So it's just that alone is going to make this weekend a lot of fun.
Yep. We are all looking forward to it. Marty, appreciate you stopping by, man.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime.
All right. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. And here's the deal. Yes, we are at a different location and destination here, SG1 Sports. This is, of course, I'll let Chris know he can stick around for as long as he wants. It's his channel. I am going by his commands tonight, but we will be here each and every Monday night. There is a method to the madness. But we will be here every Monday night. So this is the late night Voice of College Football show, the college football show. I don't get to talk to Matt quite as often as I used to. So it's great to have Matt here, Trojans Wire, vocfb.com as well. And of course, USC at the Voice of College Football. And while I still can, Matt, I guess I'm going to brag about my picks. 12-4 against the spread last weekend, 49-25 against the spread. So you get a 12-pack from Matt. You get about 20 to 25 picks from me. You also get Steve Day's, Corey Braddis picks, Steve Merrill's under the radar selection, which is 30-14 against the spread the last 3 years. So you can sign up on the premium tier on YouTube on what is the main channel for me, the Voice of College Football, or on Patreon. I've dropped that link there in the chat. So darn Oklahoma getting that safety later. I would have been 13-3 against the spread this past weekend.
Or just get rid of
Mark,
they cheated on.
Yes. Yeah. You pick like 3 different things that could have happened in my direction, but those things even out. Certainly Michigan State did me a favor scoring a late touchdown to cover against USC. That was completely meaningless. So again, Chris, certainly hang out with us as long as you want. I am curious to get Matt's take on USC's performance against Michigan State. I picked it up. I was sitting right here, so I didn't get to see the bulk of the game in terms of when USC established a lead, but I saw Michigan State's mini comeback. I think I turned it on at 31-10, got to see Michigan State put a little scare in there, 31-24 with a defensive strip, and then a couple touchdown drives and make it interesting for a couple minutes there. But Sparty just could not stop that USC offense.
Yeah, so Boston College lost to Stanford, gave up 30 to Stanford. That Boston College team took Michigan State to overtime and scored 40 against Michigan State. So that told me going into this game, USC is going to hang a big number on Michigan State. So I went with the over. The over was 55.5. That was a pretty easy cash there. But I did have Michigan State plus the 17.5 because USC's defense is just so spotty. And it's a point of real concern because D'Anton Lynn, he came into UCLA 2 years ago. Instant dramatic improvement. He comes to USC last year. Instant dramatic improvement. Now, of course, Alex Grinch left the bar very low. Still, like Lynn comes in and immediately and dramatically elevates the level of performance. So why are things not clicking 4 games into the season? This is not D'Anton Lynn's usual track record of immediately cleaning things up. Now, there are some injuries. Secondary's banged up. Prophet Brown is a guy every USC watcher thinks is really important to that secondary. Kamari Ramsey is playing nickel, and our loyal viewers on our USC show here at the Voice of College Football, they're saying, hey, Kamari Ramsey should be playing safety. Get him out of nickel. But I think the injury situation is, to a certain extent, forcing D'Anton Lynn's hand. But anyway, the pieces are not in alignment in that secondary. The USC pass rush is elite. Like, they're devouring quarterbacks left and right. Jakeem Stewart is a dude, the highly touted 5-star freshman. He's the real deal. But if the pass rush doesn't get home, that secondary is exposed, and it's not really playing at a high level. So the worry going into Illinois and other bigger games coming up, Michigan, Notre Dame, is if the pass rush doesn't get home, is the secondary going to be able to sustain things? So last year, USC was a defense-first team. This year, it's back to being an offense-first team. Jaden Maiava has been amazing. I think a lot of people expected him to be good. I don't think people, myself included, expected him to be so clean with the ball. 0 turnovers in 4 games. Like, not even one really bad, really dumb pass. He's been so clean, in addition to being that familiar, dynamic, dual-threat quarterback who's tailored to a Lincoln Riley offense. Miller Moss was not a dual-threat guy. He was chained to the pocket, 7-step drop back, not much else. Maiava offers all of those different threats that Caleb Williams and Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts offered in a Lincoln Riley offense, but he's also being clean with the ball. And he was a mess, Maiava, in the bowl game against Texas A&M. His football IQ just not very sharp. What Lincoln Riley has done in 8 months of the offseason just reinforces how much of a quarterback whisperer Lincoln Riley is. So the offense, feel pretty good about it. Obviously, the offensive line has been going up against weak defensive fronts from Purdue and Michigan State. Like, I had no doubt that USC was just going to be able to do what it wanted on offense. So now let's see about Illinois on the road, Fox Big Noon, how much of resistance USC meets. And like, we're all waiting to see at USC what happens when an opponent, it can be defense, it can be offense, it can be anything. What happens when an opponent plays well, plays tough, raises the bar in terms of, what USC has to match or exceed. These first 4 games haven't taught me a whole lot. And so we're just waiting to see USC get a real test. Will it come Saturday? I know Illinois was missing like 6 defensive backs. I think Illinois' accumulation of injuries is why USC is opening as a 6.5-point favorite. That was an eye-grabbing number. I was expecting maybe like 1.5, 2. So like, I think that number is based on not so much Illinois losing by 53 to Indiana. It's the infirmary. It's Illinois missing a lot of bodies on the back end. So, the ideal scenario for USC, get that quick 14-0 lead, expose Illinois' secondary, and then you can just release your hounds, your pass rush for the rest of the game. And so your secondary can be protected. But if Illinois gets off to a good start and this becomes a rock fight, then USC could really be in a lot of trouble. It'll be interesting to see how that game unfolds.
Yeah, as you allude to, Indiana's defensive front was way too much for Illinois. And even if you go back to the Duke game, even though Illinois won the game by 19 eventually, -4 yards rushing at halftime, 8 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Duke should have had a 2 or 3 score lead. Then in Illinois' superior depth and so forth started to take hold in the fourth quarter, and they won going away. But they better start blocking somebody, or USC is going to have a sack fest.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that Illinois Duke game. Duke committed 5 turnovers, and most of them were dumb turnovers. It was not Illinois making an amazing play. It was Duke just, tripping over its shoelaces. So if USC takes care of the ball, delivers the first punch, Illinois might fold like a lawn chair. But if Illinois gets off to a good start and USC has to climb uphill, something it hasn't done these first 4 weeks, it could snowball negatively against the Trojans. So not all games are like this, but to me, this is a really important first quarter, first half type of game. First half, I think, is going to be determinative of the outcome. So Pete Carroll, former USC coach, says, "Can you win in the first quarter?" No, maybe yes in this game.
Yeah, 7 sacks for Indiana against Illinois.
Yeah, Luke Altmaier did not have much of a chance in that one. We've got a call coming in, but before we take a call from our buddy Caden, we do have a couple super chats to clean up here. Tony Montana, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate you. Mark Rogers, can I get a shout out for Andrew Sturr?
He misspelled it. It's A. Drewster.
A. Drewster.
A. Drewster, yeah.
Well, I guess you just gave yourself a shout out. So there it is. A. Drewster, shout out to you. All right. Then we've got Mason Cole checking in. Mason, we so much appreciate your contribution. Thoughts on Louisville or Syracuse competing for an ACC championship? Well, I have not seen Louisville play this year. Obviously, they've played 3 group of 5 teams. I will see them play possibly against Pitt on Saturday, although there are 2. I can only keep my eyes on 2 games. I go with a third screen, but it gets neglected unless there are commercial breaks on the other 2. I'm just not that functional to watch 3 games at the same time. So we got 2 really good ones at noon, but Louisville Pitt looks like my third choice. And again, I am a big believer in Jeff Brom. I think he is one of the very best coaches in the country. But again, I haven't scouted Louisville to date. Obviously, our buddy Miller Moss is at the controls there. They put up, I believe, 40 against Bowling Green on Saturday. Syracuse, that performance on Saturday, that's a great win for Fran Brown. There's no question about that. But that speaks more to Clemson than it does to Syracuse. This is a football team that lost by 3 scores, legitimately lost by 3 scores against Tennessee. Scrapped the Colgate score. They had to go to overtime to take out UConn. I do not expect Syracuse to be a very good football team this year. Maybe they get to 6 wins and get to a bowl game, but I am not seeing them in the ACC championship hunt. Although, again, what they did to Clemson is pretty remarkable on Saturday. So good for them. Good for Fran Brown. He's off to a great start in his career at Syracuse, obviously, after a 10-3 year. I'm going to have to see Louisville play against Pitt in particular before I give them any kind of an evaluation myself.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also for Syracuse, they lost their quarterback, Steve Angeli, I believe, is out for the rest of the season. So I don't see Syracuse. Louisville's interesting, though. Like you, we haven't really seen anything, but.
That's right, Steve Angeli. So they had something going there with Steve Angeli kind of being the thrower and Ricky Collins the runner. And that was my third game at noon last week. So I was catching a couple plays here and there. I actually enjoyed watching that on the Sky Cam is where I was watching the Syracuse Clemson game as my third option. But for them to put up 34 and really a comfortable win at Clemson was something to behold. All right.
Yeah, if Chris Berman was doing college football highlights, he'd be calling that quarterback peanut butter and jelly. So won't get a chance to hear that on the ESPN airwaves. In terms of addressing Mason's question, Georgia Tech, and one of the Florida-based schools, and of course you have Miami playing Florida State pretty soon. But Brent Key, he gets his guys up for the big ones, and that proven track record of winning the big ones. Georgia Tech just has to avoid stepping on a rake in games it's supposed to win. So like the path to Charlotte is right there for Georgia Tech, and I think you have to put the Yellow Jackets a notch or two above Louisville and Syracuse. So right now, I think you're really looking at three teams: the two Sunshine State powers and Georgia Tech. Two of those three go to Charlotte. We talked about the downfall of Clemson. Let's not forget the downfall of SMU. That's been a shocker. Kevin Jennings coming back. You have a really good, talented quarterback coming back, and SMU has been awful. So Clemson and SMU, the two teams who played in the ACC title game last season, already done essentially. Just absolute disaster for each of those programs. So give me one of the two Miami schools and Georgia Tech as that trio is going to provide the ACC title game matchup.
And Georgia Tech does not play Florida State or Miami.
Yeah,
played one of those.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
And they've already beaten Clemson, which I understand Clemson is not Clemson, but they may be, ruining some seasons maybe down the stretch. Maybe they'll be that team this year. But, SMU, terrible in particular on defense. I didn't see the Baylor game, but they gave up 48. I did see the TCU game, and they had a chance to win that game. They took a lead in the fourth quarter, but they gave up well over 500 yards of total offense in that game. They just got shredded in the secondary by Eric McAllister in particular, who had a huge day, like 250 some yards receiving, 3 touchdowns, could have had 5. He had one reversed that me and the announcers believe was a touchdown catch. And then he had one ripped out of his hands for an interception in the end zone. He almost had 5 touchdown receptions in that game for TCU. And I believe TCU's got a big one coming up Friday night against Arizona State. That's the latest in the Big 12 round robin of there being about 6 or 7 teams that could be really good at the top. So that'll be an interesting one.
That's turning out to be a huge game because we talked earlier about Texas Tech being the favorite. I would say right behind them, it's TCU and Arizona State. So that could be a game that decides who goes to the Big 12 championship.
Yep. All right, checking in. We got our buddy Caden. Caden, what's going on?
Good evening, Mark. How are you? Steve, Matt, good to hear from you, gentlemen. How are we doing tonight, gentlemen?
Don't be gun shy, Caden. I promise not to kick you off tonight.
Well, I was just going to give my takes on the ACC. I've got Miami favored to win the ACC title this year. Carson Beck and their amazing offense. I mean, obviously, the game against Florida was just a showcase of what Miami's capable of and how loaded that offensive team is. Their defensive side of the ball, I'm really loving what they got down there at the 305. And I told Jada Gonzalez on Miami Live last week, I've got Miami favored to win the ACC title. Whether Georgia Tech plays them in the ACC title game, I've got Georgia Tech losing that because Georgia Tech has not faced a loaded Miami team that's ready to rumble in the ACC title. And if it's on the line, I know Miami will pull out that win. And I do want to point out, I do have Miami. Speaking of Miami, I got Miami beating Florida State. That is a no questions asked win for Miami. Miami's going to show off on offense, bring it on defense, and they're winning that game. No questions asked. As far as every other conference goes right now, I've got Georgia winning the ACC or the SEC, excuse me. Iowa State or BYU winning the Big 12, and then Ohio State winning the Big 10. And I do got them beating Illinois by 2 touchdowns. I've got them beating Penn State by 2.5 with a field goal. I've got them beating Michigan by 2 touchdowns. And I've got them beating, Washington by 3 touchdowns at the most. Because I'm confident Julian Sand throwing the ball to Jeremiah Smith, Cardell Tate, and then the tight end group. I mean, that's the tight end group I feel confident in our defense. Obviously, that's a stronghold of this team. So I'm pretty confident this season. Getting into a little new hobby, Mark. I got into a little new hobby this year for college football.
Okay.
I've been trying new.
That was going to be my next question. I didn't know that we wanted to hear about your new hobby. Okay, it relates to college football. Very good. Go ahead.
Trying college football traditional snacks. Really good. Like game day snacks. You know what I mean?
Yes. So what is your choice of snacks?
I'd say game day nachos. Queso nachos, really good. Especially it goes for any game, especially game day hot dogs, grilled. I mean, now that's the icing on the cake. And then obviously you can't miss out whether you're a Buckeye fan or not. Ohio State Buckeye candy, no questions asked. Delicious treat for a W for the Buckeyes. So I gotta give it that credit. And then what was your question, Mark? I wanted to know.
Well, I didn't have a question. I just didn't know what where you were leading to with your latest hobby. So you've become a chef. You've become an outside grill extraordinaire.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt to get a little extra hobby besides giving my takes. And as you probably know, Mark, I have a little bet with Will and D on as far as Notre Dame goes. I've got Notre Dame going 8-4. Now, when I said them losing to Arkansas and Pitt, and then mainly, but I did not have them losing to Purdue. That was the one game that I crossed off as a Notre Dame win. So I feel pretty confident in my bet against Will. So Matt, I'm just going to say USC needs to stretch it out on defense, and they need to get that defensive room a little more, get them a little bit more aggressive, especially on third down situations, because they've been slacking a little on defense, and their offense needs to pick it up because especially if they're going to play Ohio State, it's not going to end well for them if they play them in the horseshoe, let alone in the Coliseum. So that's just my 2 cents for you, Matt.
Well, I mean, if USC plays Ohio State this season, it's either going to be in Indianapolis for the Big Ten title game or in the playoffs. So I really hope USC plays Ohio State this year. That means USC will have achieved something.
Well, and then if you lose, obviously, I'll be calling out you and USC fans for the lack of momentum that that USC showed in the game against Ohio State if they don't bring it on defense or offense. Or just Ohio State's got a good defense that just likes to sack USC's offensive game. But that's just my 2 cents, Matt.
Well, it's my guess
hey, you know what?
that you're going to be calling us regardless of what happens. So,
well, I'm going to be calling out Matt, and I'm going to be calling out USC fans if they lose. So,
well, I'm just going to say, if you tell me right now that Ohio State beats USC this season, sign me up, because again, that means USC will have dramatically raised the bar for the program.
You want me to say right now, Matt? I'll tell you. USC loses to Ohio State in the Big Ten title game in Indianapolis by 3 touchdowns.
I'll sign on the dotted line.
Well, Matt, I hope you're prepared for USC to get the worst butt kicking of this season. So I hope you're prepared to watch it.
If it means we're 11-1, sure.
And then you lose the Big Ten title game to Ohio State.
11-2, like that's progress. I'll take it. We've been 7-5, 7-6.
Because Michigan, let's be honest, they're pretty much a dumpster. And Oregon, I'm kind of a 50-50 wise on them. But Washington is a garbage heap. UCLA is a garbage heap. And Nebraska is not really much of a competitive team. And especially Iowa. Iowa really stinks.
Caden, you do realize we're only about what, about 8 or 9 months removed from Ohio State not reaching the Big Ten championship game.
Mark, I'm just giving my 2 cents, all right? I'm just giving my 2 cents.
Absolutely. I'm just pointing something out.
I know you're pointing something out, but I'm also just giving my 2 cents.
Yeah.
All right.
That's about the extent of it.
I'll bump it up to 4 cents if I need to. 6 cents even.
Oh, please.
I was thinking about a nickel. Yeah.
I'll bump it up to 10 cents if I have to. 20 cents even.
All right, Caden. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I do want to say this, Mark. Your points against the spread, I will say, is pretty impressive so far this year. So I'll give you credit. And Steve and Matt, your points against the spread, give you credit as well, gentlemen. But I think I got this season capped off pretty well for my picks. So I think I have a good chance of winning this season for my picks.
Well, you gave us conference championship picks. You did not give us game predictions.
Well, I'll give you the one that I'm really wanting to give Miami, Florida State. Miami wins that by 3 touchdowns. Okay. No questions asked.
All right.
And then Georgia walks in this weekend. Easy win. That defense just comes in there, lights them up, and gets the job done by 3 touchdowns. And then Ohio State against Washington. We go in there, light them up, no questions asked.
Okay.
And it's a job done well. So that's just my sense. So I'll get out of here. But Mark, Steve, Matt, good to hear from you gentlemen as always. And as always, go Bucks. Trojans suck.
All right. There's our
he kept calling Chris Steve for some reason.
I'm sorry, what's that?
He kept calling Chris Steve for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know. I just noticed that at the end. I didn't notice that at all.
He did it multiple times.
You know, the one thing I will say for Caden is he came in here with a decent attitude, and we're only about 3 days removed from me basically shouting him off the air and cutting him off because it was just so incredibly ridiculous. So. All right, folks.
We have short memories around here.
Yes, when people state facts that aren't facts, that usually pushes my buttons. Well, we've got Bama, Georgia, of course. That's the other primetime game. And we've got a slew of 3:30 games, including Ohio State and Washington, and a couple games in the SEC with Ole Miss taking on LSU, Matt, and Texas A&M getting some respect after going to South Bend, and they take on Auburn. So what other games are on your radar?
Well, I mean, just with Alabama, Georgia, just that is the Kalen DeBoer temperature check game. You know, the face planted against Florida State on the road. So, like, if Georgia does hang a decisive defeat on Bama, like that cauldron in Tuscaloosa is going to be bubbling. And, you know, one kind of side note, with Dabo Swinney tumbling the way he has, like there should be no question that if the Bama job comes open or is about to come open or could come open, Dan Lanning is easily the number one guy. And it's striking how the Dabo to Bama conversation, which, you know, has been a behind the scenes talking point for a long time in this industry, it's gone, done. It's just not going to happen. No one can look at Dabo and his inflexibility and say, oh, no, that's the guy to lead the Crimson Tide into a new era. And now, you know, if DeBoer, you know, crashes and burns, it's clearly Dan Lanning. It's his job to lose. So that's certainly a big plot point. LSU Ole Miss, you know, can LSU's offense get going? I mean, LSU's won, but, you know, beat Clemson, and we know Clemson's not all that great. So it really was more a commentary about Clemson than it was about LSU. Florida, pretty much the same story. A lot more of a commentary on just how pitiful that offense is than anything about LSU. So it's not just LSU winning, though, of course, that is the main goal. It's, can LSU hang a big number? Can Garrett Nussmeier and that offense finally get untracked? That's going to be something to watch for in Oxford.
Well, since you hit on the coaching situation, Matt, obviously 2 already axed, and then we've got Luke Fickell, Mike Gundy, and
Sam Pittman.
Billy Napier. Billy Napier.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
Do you have
I don't see any of them surviving this season. I mean, like these programs are cratering. Especially Wisconsin. Wisconsin is cratering. Like, you get dog walked by Maryland. It was a 27-10 final. It was 27-3 before Wisconsin gets the late cosmetic touchdown. I mean, the bottom has fallen out, and Wisconsin's playing the big teams in the Big Ten later on. So, like, Wisconsin's going to be like 3-6, 2-5 in mid to late October. You can't hang on to Luke Fickell the rest of the season. The buyout's huge, but like you'll negotiate that. And so while we're on Fickell, here's an interesting little plot point. All right, Pat Fitzgerald, he's not employed, so schools can talk to him. Schools can interview him right now. That doesn't apply to other coaches working at other jobs. So, like, if I'm at UCLA, I at least want to have negotiations with Pat Fitzgerald. It doesn't mean like I'm going to hire him, because there's a lot that USC needs to sort out internally. But like, there's no harm in interviewing him. There's no harm in having a conversation with him. And so if I'm Wisconsin, if someone else wants to pick off Pat Fitzgerald, I got to fire Luke Fickell now, because face it, Pat Fitzgerald is such a natural, stylistic, method-based fit for Wisconsin. Physical, tough, defense first, amazing linebacker play, fundamentals. Like, Pat Fitzgerald to Madison just makes all the sense in the world. So if you're Wisconsin, you need to be proactive about this in case UCLA or Virginia Tech, someone else wants to go get him. And again, because Fitz is unemployed, you can have conversations with him if you have an open job. So that is a very interesting layered plot point to look at in the coaching carousel.
Yeah, I don't know how Mike Gundy survives either, and how he has fallen in the span of one season and 3 games is pretty remarkable, because he used to just be able to chalk up 9-3 or 8-4 every year. And then obviously they go to a Big 12 championship game 2 years ago, but couldn't win a game in the conference last year and just got completely run off the field. And they're just a complete embarrassment.
Yeah, if you look at their roster, like all the transfers that they brought in were like FCS players or I'm not even talking about like good group of 5 players. Their roster is just bad. Like, they may have the worst roster in the Power 4.
I believe they do.
Yep.
Yeah. And what's happened at UCLA, we've talked about it many times, Matt, and that came to fruition. And we'll take our call here in just a second, but I'll just summarize it this way. At the time that Deshaun Foster was hired, my statement was, maybe this guy's got an it factor that I don't know about. Maybe they just know something that the rest of us don't know. However, never been a head coach, never even been a coordinator. Really? Is this the risk you want to take? And then we see him at Big Ten Media Days. And again, I was perplexed in that one part of me was saying, okay, give the guy the benefit of the doubt, relating speaking ability at a media event versus running a college football program. I can't make a direct correlation there. However, you're new to the conference, you're new to the program, you're a first-time head coach. Coaches usually care about how their team and their program's presented, especially when they're garnering the spotlight as a first-time member in the league. And even if you gave that absolutely zero thought, so you place any head coach in college football and tell them you're going to talk in 30 seconds. You're going to walk up there, and they had no idea they would do a better job. But if nothing else, he had a 3-hour plane flight to be thinking about what to say. And I just thought that just does not speak well to what are typically detail paranoid coaches. That they usually major on specifics and details and being buttoned up. And here's a guy that's just kind of freelancing, and he should have been self-aware enough to know he's not the guy to freelance. And then, you know, we see 15 games into his tenure what the result is. All right. Yeah, we got a phone call coming in from our buddy Andrewster.
Yeah, hey,
What's going on?
I'm doing good. Just want to say hi to Matt. I want to say hi to Steve. I want to say hi to you, Mark. I just wanted to ask you about my hero, Mark Stoops, okay?
Okay.
When are we going to build that statue for him, okay? Like, I am demanding that Kentucky and all our Kentuckians over here, we build that statue at Kroger Field right now.
Yeah, if you had a time machine, Andrewster, and you could tell Mark Stoops to give up the job and quit and retire about 3 years ago, he would have had a shot at a statue.
No, I don't want him to quit. I like him right where he is, okay? Mark Stoops is the greatest Kentucky coach of all time, okay? And he's going to continue bringing success to the SEC, okay? Oh my goodness.
This is a Louisville fan, if you can't tell.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, I would love to talk to you guys about basketball too a little bit because the whole PK and Mark Pope situation. Okay.
Yeah,
I just got a thing to all the Kentucky fans out there. I want to say, get ready November. Okay, we're gonna beat you twice in November. And I got a little thing about I don't know, Clemson, by the way.
Like, we are talking about the Mark Pope that played for Kentucky in the late 90s, correct?
That is correct.
That's the last time I thought about him or his name rolled off my lips. Yeah. Let's stick to football. What's on your mind concerning football?
What is my mind concerning football? Well, the lack of respect that Louisville is getting right now. I know we got a weak schedule, but that's not our fault. We play who we have.
That is your fault.
Well, Indiana backed out first off, so.
Well, we're not talking about Indiana. Okay,
well, they backed out. We were supposed to play them.
Okay, I got you. Because you played them in Indianapolis a couple years ago, so there was supposed to be a second game.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's legit.
Yes, it is.
Didn't Louisville play Purdue in Indianapolis?
Well, we played Purdue in Indianapolis. We didn't play IU. We were supposed to play IU this year, and then we're supposed to play them next year. Or 2 years.
Both of them in Indianapolis, actually. If I'm not mistaken. I'm going to look that up while you tell us why Louisville is a threat in the ACC.
Well, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to let you look that up real quick. I'm going to get my thoughts together. Because I am very upset right now.
Well, do you have a question for us? You're upset.
Do you have a question for myself, Mark, and Chris?
You mean Steve?
Yeah, what's this inside joke? I need to know, right?
Well, the whole inside joke was that last caller calling Chris Steve all the time.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Really funny, really elaborate.
Yeah, well, I'm not the one that did it. Anyway, Mark, I want to know your thoughts on Arch Manning. Do you think he's a bust, or do you think he's actually going to get better?
That's a great question because my thoughts about Arch Manning, seeing just a few highlights, huddle tapes going into his tenure at Texas, my thought was, okay, if this guy is being overhyped, then most likely he is not the passer that his uncles are, but he's being elevated because of the name. And he probably is being given the very best coaching and tutelage to maximize his skill set, to maximize his abilities. His technique, his mechanics are going to be razor sharp. His understanding of the game is going to be razor sharp because look at his uncles. but it's turned out to kind of be the opposite. Like, this guy is a naturally good runner. He's a better athlete than his uncles, but his mechanics are pretty atrocious at this point, and that's after being in the program for 2 years plus. So I don't know what to think of the guy. He threw 2 dimes against Ohio State in the fourth quarter after playing atrocious football the rest of the game. I've not seen him play since. I don't know if that's something that Steve Sarkisian's going to tackle during the season, a mechanics issue. If he didn't address it in the spring or in August, now is not necessarily the time to have that running through his brain while he's trying to throw passes against SEC defenses. So I would lean toward maybe not a, bust on the scale of 1 to 10 at the top of the Richter scale, but a pretty high lean of a bust at this point.
Okay. Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. Well, thank you for the call.
Well, we appreciate the call. Thanks for being here.
Anytime.
All right, folks. I think we may call it a show, unless we've got anybody else with any comments or questions there in the chat. Nobody else calling in. We do appreciate everyone making the adjustment tonight. So my apologies that I just got that notice out a few hours ago that we were going to make the switch that was planned to come over here to SG1 Sports at the Voice of College Football. Chris, what do you have planned for this channel for the next week or so?
Yeah, so the schedule here is we give 5 takeaways on Sunday. I give my top 25 on Monday. We've got our playoff eliminator on Tuesday, upset alert on Wednesday, 5 expectations for the week on Thursday, and then I update my playoff predictions on Friday. That's kind of the weekly schedule.
See, if I had Chris planning out my channel, I would get many, many more views. I need to do that. Matt, what's going on at Trojans Wire?
Well, preliminaries are over. Illinois feels like the real beginning of the season. So Tuesday night, I'm with Ethan Inman and Crash Collier previewing the Illinois game at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. You want to join us for the big USC Illinois preview. Like, so much to discuss. One interesting side note, Kurt Cignetti was asked about the Indiana-Iowa game. And he said, well, it's going to be a lot more of a challenge than the last one, that's for sure. So, like, Cignetti throwing an elbow at the team he just kicked to the curb. I mean, really zesty. So you need to bring that up with Corey Brada. And we have an Illinois show. I'm sure they're going to bring that point up. So, Cignetti just makes things more interesting. You might hate him, but he makes things more interesting.
Good reminder, folks. We've got the Iowa show coming up 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 Central on the Hawkeyes channel. And we've got our buddy Alec Keyser from the Indiana channel there to preview. And I know Corey and Alec don't necessarily see eye to eye on the status of the 2 programs, Iowa and Indiana. So that should be a fun one. And I see that Indiana is a touchdown plus favorite in that game at Kinnick. Okay. All right.
That's what happens when you win by 53.
You win by 53. Yeah. Wow. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here. Once again, Monday nights here. We'll pick it up back on the main channel at the Voice of College Football Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If there are football games that are meaningful, meaning like Arizona State, TCU, Virginia, Florida State Friday night, we'll be on after the games. Otherwise, it's 10 p.m. Eastern time. Give me a call and we'll talk college football leading into a huge week 5. We will see you next time. I will. Iowa show Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for being here.